Today, we are going to undertake a journey that will take us from the surface of the waves to the ocean floor and beyond, into the abyss, as deep and pressurized as it is possible to go. To begin deep-sea exploration, we always enter through the ceiling. The surface, an entrance door that covers 2/3 of our planet. And it's there, somewhere in the Pacific, an ocean that on its own is larger than all the continents of our planet combined, that we're going to start our dive.
And here we are, barely starting our descent into the water column. The temperatures start to drop drastically, and the brightness has significantly declined. At 100 meters deep, even in the clearest waters under the spotlight of a sun at its zenith, visibility is already only 5% of its surface value. Here, the light diffuses painfully, and everything is as if soaked in a soft twilight where there is already practically only one big blue left.
And here we are at 200 meters deep, leaving behind us the photic zone, which represents in volume only 2% of all the ocean's water, but houses 90% of the marine life that we know of. We are now entering the twilight zone, the beginning of the deep ocean. The residual light intensity has dropped below 1% of its surface value, and the amount of solar energy reaching here is no longer sufficient for plants to perform photosynthesis. From now on, the entire plant kingdom is above us.
Then, past the 332 meters depth, while a water height of the order of the Eiffel Tower looms over us, we pass the point beyond which no scuba diver has ever descended. Everyone who ventured beyond that descended, locked in boxes, protected by walls several centimeters thick. This extremely vast column of water that we are sinking into is one of the largest and least known environments on our planet. Perhaps even more mysterious than the ocean floor itself, because the submersibles that venture here are often in transit, passing through, heading towards the deep sea. It is thus estimated that on a global scale, less than 1% of this water column has been explored.
Moving freely in 3 dimensions, the animals evolving here are often difficult to observe. But with a bit of luck, in this increasingly dark, food-poor environment subject to increasing pressure, one can encounter life that has managed to adapt to these very particular conditions. Sparse and very varied, it includes zooplankton, crustaceans, jellyfish, squids, siphonophores, abyssal fish, and occasionally sharks, swordfish, or passing marine mammals. It also contains many gelatinous animals that seem to have come straight out of wild science fiction novels.
Without a scale to figure out the size of what we observe, our mind, often still soaked in the imagination of myths and legends of the abyss, tends to represent these creatures lurking in the depths as gigantic. Except that most of them do not exceed a few centimeters in length.
Such as cyclotones, which are considered no more and no less than the most numerous vertebrates on the entire planet. Here, in the water column, all species evolve in a disconcerting world of uniformity, without visual landmarks, without reliefs or seasons. At these depths, even the worst hurricanes have no impact. Because although capable of unleashing surface waters, they already have almost no influence on their movements past 100 meters. In the deep ocean, far from the tumult of the rolling and agitation of waves, it's perpetual calm.
And as we delve further, light occasionally makes its return. Because here, numerous organisms have evolved ways to produce it through chemical processes. These phenomena of bioluminescence, relatively rare on Earth, are legion in the water column. It is estimated that nearly 80% of animals living between 200 and 1,000 meters deep are capable of producing light. It must be said that having this ability in almost total darkness gives an advantage for mating, seducing, hunting, or not being hunted.
Because in this twilight zone, even the weak residual light painfully coming from the upper layers can be detected by some predators. And potential prey, To go unnoticed, use a technique called counterlighting. In order to avoid their silhouette casting a shadow by contrast, they have equipped themselves, along their belly, with rows of photophores which, by emitting a light similar in intensity and color to that coming difficultly from above, allows them to blend into the background.
And here we are at the 1,000-meter level. In all the oceans of the globe, at this depth, the thermometer invariably stabilizes around 4 degrees.
In the 1930s, 2 adventurers were the first to lay their terrestrial eyes on this eternal night of the deep sea. Simply attached to the end of a steel cable wound around a mechanical winch, they descended to these depths enclosed in the very first bathysphere. Forced to observe the weighty darkness through 7-centimeter thick quartz portholes to withstand the 90 kilograms of pressure exerted on each square centimeter. They will see some mysterious shadows pass by here.
And the most unsettling thing about all this might be to think that even at such depths, although overshadowed by a column of water almost a kilometer high, we have only made a fifth of the journey that still separates us from the ocean floor, located 4,000 meters below. Here, even the twilight has gone out. No more photons, even of low energy, are reaching. Below, beyond, is the midnight zone. To feed, in the absence of plants, all organisms continuously evolving in this environment depend directly or indirectly on the 20% of the primary food production produced at the surface, which eventually sinks down here. As we delve deeper into this darkness, now total and only occasionally disturbed by the presence of bioluminescent organisms and the beams of light from autonomous rovers and bathyscarfs, life begins to become more scarce. Because the amount of available organic matter also continues to drop.
And here we are, after 2 hours of diving, we enter the abyssal zone before touching the bottom in stride. Welcome to the abyssal plain, a plain of a mind-boggling extent on the scale of our planet. Because the total surface area of the deep sea is 326 million square kilometers, 500 times larger than France, 34 times than the United States, 19 times larger than Russia. And the vast majority of these depths remain unknown or unexplored.
In this hostile environment, the water temperature has dropped very slightly. It is now close to the freezing point. Only animals, bacteria, archaea, or viruses survive here. And with the exception of life forms that flourish near hydrothermal vents and other cold seeps, which we discussed at length in a previous episode, all these living beings depend directly or indirectly for their food on what deigns to fall down here.
The landscape around you is lunar, with occasional rocks scattered about. And the ground shines under the spotlight as if the place was sprinkled with snow. And in a way it is. Because on this ocean floor, it ends up landing, sinking. After weeks of travel from the upper layers of the ocean, 1 to 5% of the primary organic matter produced in the water column ends up here. In short, it snows under the seas. A marine snow made up of microscopic debris, tiny organic particles, coming from pieces of decomposing corpses, residues of suspended plankton, and small pieces of microscopic skeletons.
All these debris, which fall slowly swirling, eventually settle on the bottom, where, over time, they form a kind of mud, a fine powdery cover that neither wind nor rain can disperse, and which accumulate and carpet the ocean floor at the rate of 2 to 3 cm thick every 2,000 years on average. In other words, you've just landed in the largest cemetery on the entire planet. Without the existence of these fine flakes of organic matter, this hostile environment would be nothing more than a vast food desert. But thanks to it, there is a sparsely populated macrofauna, where sea cucumbers mingle with damselfish and grenadiers.
It's amusing to think that this mud, which we just talked about through the movement of tectonic plates, can end up being compressed for millions of years, transformed over time into sedimentary rock, into limestone. We find it today on the surface. The cliffs of Etretat are tens of meters accumulated. And it is from this type of rock made of solidified marine snow that we built the pyramids of Giza, the Palace of Westminster, the Empire State Building, like our concrete sidewalks. All these structures contain it, and you probably put some in your mouth today, because in our toothpastes there is a base of calcium carbonate, a chalky compound forming from the accumulated microscopic skeletons in the ends of the ocean floor. As for silicon, from which we build our computer chips, it also comes largely from microscopic silica shells, fossilized and brought to the surface by millions of years of tectonic activity.
At the bottom of the ocean, to this rain of microscopic corpses is occasionally added that of mastodons. Because in the abyssal plain, whale carcasses sometimes fall. It is estimated that there are around 2 million large cetaceans of all species combined living in the oceans. Thus, each year, about 70,000 whales die of old age or disease. In most cases, their carcass will sink to the ocean floor. From then on, an ephemeral oasis of life forms around the dead, breaking the apparent monotony of the deep sea for several decades.
As you listen to me, there are about 700,000 decomposing whale carcasses lying at the bottom of the oceans. Spread across all the abyssal plains of our planet, that's an average of one large cetacean carcass every 25 kilometers. Each of them constitutes, for the 400 different animal species that can be observed feasting on them, immense reserves of nutrients, gifts fallen from above. From a nutritional point of view, each of these carcasses, over an area of 1 hectare, is the equivalent of 2,000 years of snow in terms of organic matter supply.
For the animals that evolve here, these carcasses are both windfalls, moments of respite, and also opportunities to recharge their batteries. Because to live in the deep sea, you have to know how to stock up. For deep sea fish, knowing how to store energy is a major issue. It is thus believed that grenadiers can survive 5 months without eating. Often forced to travel great distances to feed, deep-sea fish have become masters in the art of conserving their resources. Here, the living, compressed by more than 500 bars of pressure, move in slow motion, because over the course of evolution, the density of their muscle and bone tissue has particularly reduced. Their flesh has become gelatinous, and their bodies, loaded with water and fat, have gained buoyancy.
And while the height of the water column above us is on the order of 17 stacked Eiffel Towers, to go even deeper, we will have to find holes in this plain, or rather, oceanic trenches at subduction zones, where tectonic plates sink beneath each other.
Leaving further and further behind us the existence of a sun definitively forgotten, buried under more than 6 kilometers of black water, we enter a zone named after the Greek god Hades, the master of the underworld. Yet here, in the Hadal zones, which account for less than 2% of the total area of the seafloor, it is cold and the water temperature no longer decreases. As we descend deeper, only the pressure increases in strength.
At the bottom of the Mariana Trench, at 19,971 meters deep, within the Challenger Deep, the world's deepest canyon on every square centimeter of surface, this pressure is equivalent to that which an elephant would exert walking on you with stilettos, or to that of a small car placed on a fingernail. And yet, even in one of the most inhospitable environments on our planet, it is not uncommon to encounter life.
In 1960, the bathyscaphe Trieste lands after just under 4 hours of descent. At the bottom of this trench, the 2 men on board look through their porthole and see passing by, living peacefully there, a flatfish. The bathyscaphe will only stay about 20 minutes at this depth. Here, exploring often boils down to taking a quick look, then going back up immediately. It will be 52 years before someone returns to this place.
Today, if 12 humans have walked on the moon, only 4 have descended more than 10,000 meters deep. And the maps we have of the surface of Mars are still more detailed than those of the underwater reliefs of our own planet. Even today, certain areas of the globe, such as the South Atlantic, the underwater mountains of the Pacific, or the Southern and Arctic Oceans, remain largely unexplored. Thus, during each scientific study campaign of the deep ocean that is conducted, it is not uncommon to bring up, with each dive, more than 50% of unidentified species.
Around the world, there are only a handful of submersibles, these kinds of spacecraft directed downwards that can reach the depths of the abyssal plain. Despite their sophistication, studying deep sea life remains very complicated, especially since often the dazzling light emitted by the projectors causes the immediate flight of the abyssal fauna. And its collection sometimes amounts to a feat. Consider that this species of Ctenophore, very common in the water column, has been observed many times, but has so far never been collected.
Frustration of knowing that on a global scale, only 10% of the seabed below 200 meters deep has been explored in detail.
But also joy at the idea that the remaining 90%, which have barely been touched, are full, hidden at the bottom of the oceans of wonders to discover.
Inhabitants of the air?
Here, those of the water.
This slightly crazy project to make you discover this planet, the subterranean world beneath ours, is nearing its end.
We can never thank enough all those who, on Kiss Kiss and other support platforms, made this adventure possible.
And it's with a vague oceanic feeling in the soul that we say to you,
See you soon.
for other adventures, glug glug.